Coming up today, the government is considering holding off on taxing the subcontractors of Korea's ailing shipbuilders to sweeten the pill of ongoing restructuring efforts. 3 North Korean women who fled a North Korean restaurant in China are reportedly in a third country awaiting a flight to South Korea as they look to defect. Plus, UN Chief Ban Ki-moon condemns the ISIS-claimed terror attacks that have killed scores on Syria's Mediterranean coast. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Tuesday, the 24th of May. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We are going to start this afternoon with domestic politics. And Korea's rival parties are once again wrangling over a controversial bill that would enable Parliament to open hearings more frequently. The ruling Saenuri party opposes the bill due to fears it would be used to paralyse parliamentary affairs and result in the abuse of legislative power. However, the main opposition Minju Party of Korea and the minor People's Party say the bill will create an institutional tool to open hearings for government affairs and examine pending issues. The presidential office of Cheongwade has maintained a cautious stance as the bill could lead to another conflict with the opposition parties, which now make up the majority in the upcoming Assembly. President Park Geun-hye is expected to decide on whether to endorse the bill after she returns from her 11-day trip to Africa and France. She will be back in Korea on June 5th. Turning now to the latest on the government's corporate restructuring drive. Officials from the government and Korea's ruling party have been discussing ways to minimize the pain on the company's subcontractors, their employees, and the wider economy in general. Shin Se-min has the details.
With a number of huge companies floundering under massive debt, the government is speeding up its corporate restructuring drive. During a special consultative meeting of the government and ruling party officials Tuesday, both sides decided to delay levying taxes and defer mandatory insurance fees from the subcontractors of cash-strapped shipyards. Financial Services Commission Chairman Im Jong-ryong said he would formulate measures to minimize the side effects that could come with the government's corporate restructuring plans. Im added the government will strive to provide support for both the employed and those who are laid off during the corporate restructuring process by creating programs to help them adjust to the inevitable upheaval. Korea's leading shipyards, the so-called Big Three of Hyundai Heavy Industries, Samsung Heavy Industries, and Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, suffered collective losses of nearly $7.4 billion last year. The eye-watering losses have forced Korea's once golden industry to downsize for the sake of its survival. All three have submitted self-rescue plans to their creditors and the government. They include steep cuts to their workforce and wages, as well as the sale of non-core assets. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
After a week of negotiations, Hyundai Merchant Marine is still no closer to reaching an agreement with foreign ship owners to lower the leasing fees for its ships. As the talks continue to drag on, pressure is mounting on Korea's second biggest shipper as it heads towards court receivership. Kwon Jang-ho reports.
We have nothing to say other than we had discussions, and we don't comment on continuing discussions.
That was last Wednesday when Hyundai Merchant Marine met with foreign ship owners to discuss lowering the charter rates for its leased ships. No agreement was reached then, and it seems no substantial progress has been made since. The struggling Korean shipper had promised its creditors that it would find a way to lower charter rates by 28%, but it's finding it hard to budge to the ship owners' positions. They argue that as unfortunate as Hyundai's position is, if they lower rates, they would have other shippers coming to them and demanding lower fees as well. Hyundai, on the other hand, is saying that the losses would be far greater if the company was to go into court receivership and only be able to pay back a small percentage of what's owed. The ship owners have previously shown signs that they might consider a 15% cut, but that falls way short of the demands of Hyundai's creditors. Hyundai already passed an original Friday deadline set by creditors to reach an agreement, and although more time has been given, a new deadline is looming. A bondholders' meeting is set for next week Tuesday, and if nothing is settled by then, there may be no choice but to head towards court receivership. Hyundai, which posted a loss of more than $200 million in the first quarter alone, will be hoping the shipowners are just playing a game of cat and mouse and that some sort of agreement can be reached before the next deadline comes. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye is set to embark on her trip to 3 African nations on Wednesday. In addition to upgrading diplomatic and economic ties, the visits are expected to pave the way for increased military cooperation, which may be the key to disrupting North Korea's military networks in Africa. Kim Min-ji has more.
Military cooperation between South Korea and Africa is expected to pick up steam following President Park Geun-hye's trip to the continent. This as the president will be accompanied by South Korean military officials, including Hwang In-moo, the vice minister of Seoul's defense ministry. The president's Africa trip will take her to Ethiopia, then Uganda, and later to Kenya. An official from Seoul's defense ministry says military ties between South Korea and Africa have been almost non-existent until now, but the trip is expected to kick things off. Ethiopia took part in the Korean War and has long been a traditional ally of South Korea, but relations with Uganda are notable, as it has long been a country friendly to North Korea. After independence from the UK in 1963, Uganda established diplomatic ties with Pyongyang and has maintained close ties in the military sector. During the president's trip, Vice Minister Hwang is expected to meet with Uganda's defense minister, along with other high-ranking officials to discuss ways to boost military cooperation. As South Korean military officials said, strengthening defense cooperation will likely be an effective means to block exports of North Korea's weapons to Africa. A recent UN report said that North Korea provided arms to Congo, while there have also been reports claiming Pyongyang built an ammunition factory in Namibia in March. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, another group of North Koreans working in China are believed to have fled their workplace in the hope of starting a better life in South Korea. The women are said to be in a third country, awaiting a flight to the south. Connie Kim with the details.
A Seoul-based media outlet reports that 3 North Koreans escaped from a North Korean restaurant in Shanghai. If confirmed, it'll be the second mass defection in less than 2 months. The report says the defectors are women in their 20s and have been staying in an undisclosed East Asian nation since last week. The women reportedly decided to defect following news that 13 compatriots defected to the south from a North Korean restaurant in China. The latest defectors are said to have suffered extreme mental stress, as North Korean authorities have tightened regulations and monitoring on overseas workers since the first mass defection.
It's a similar defection case to last month's. The women have been under enormous strain due to Pyongyang's toughened regulations after the previous group defection.
There remains some confusion over which part of China the women were working in. There have been suggestions the women were working in Xi'an rather than Shanghai, as initial reports had stated. North Korea has attempted to make it more difficult for its overseas workers to flee since April's mass defection. Employees are reportedly banned from even going outside to stop them from fleeing. The South Korean government has confirmed that the North Koreans have defected, but did not disclose how many or where they escaped from. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now staying with economic news, and Korea's state-run think tank has cut the country's growth outlook for this year to 2.6% from its earlier projection of 3%. The Korea Development Institute is joining an array of other global and local financial institutions that have trimmed their forecasts to the 2% range. The institute cites slowing exports for the downgrade, although it expects domestic demand to gradually recover on the back of construction investment. It added that a delay in the government's corporate restructuring drive could further slow the economy. The institute went on to say, however, that job losses incurred in the process of corporate restructuring could also have a negative impact on the economy. For next year, the KDI expects the Korean economy to expand 2.7%. Startups have been identified as the key to tackling Korea's stubbornly high youth unemployment rate. In fact, such venture companies are seen as more than just a place of work for some young people. It's the stuff of dreams. Lee Ji-won reports.
Here in this small building in Seoul, two grad school students launched a startup just over 2 years ago based on an idea in need.
Seatbelts are designed for adults, so when used by children, the strap tends to scratch their necks. But by using our product, the angle is adjusted, alleviating physical discomfort and providing children with a positive experience with the doll.
The product won various prizes and awards in and out of the country, but the accolades haven't necessarily translated to economic success as of yet.
We thought as long as it was functional, the product would sell. But this was very naive on our part. Consumers must be convinced that they need the product, and it's very hard to do that.
But the two continue to have faith in their products.
You must be confident and have belief. If doubt creeps in, it can really take a toll. You need to continue to test your product or service until you are certain it will work.
Many young business people are also making their start in the local food industry. This food truck in a popular university area in Seoul welcomes hordes of customers.
This patty is very juicy and the vegetables are really fresh. This burger is really delicious.
The young CEO started this food truck 6 years ago to create handmade burgers that can be easily eaten without using utensils. He opened a second branch last year, registering sales of about $506,000. Like any other business, challenges remain as the industry is often at the mercy of external factors such as weather, where cold temperatures and rain may drop sales by half. But the CEO expects the business to grow based on taste and the fact that his burgers are made to order.
Your product or service should not be swayed by trends. It has to be something unique and that you're good at. That is the key to sustaining success.
The entrepreneurs say that being a young CEO is not a disadvantage as long as you are brave and knowledgeable about your business. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
The former CEO of Oxy's Korea branch, John Lee, is back home this afternoon after a grueling 15-hour-long questioning by prosecutors over the toxic humidifier sterilizer scandal. Lee was summoned as a suspect on Monday. The investigation focused on whether Lee was aware of the toxicity of a deadly chemical in the product and the role of Oxy's London headquarters in the case. An arrest warrant may be issued if prosecutors secure evidence of Lee's involvement. Lee headed the Korean branch from 2005 to 2010. This was a period when sales of the company's sterilizers were at their peak here in Korea. He's accused of pressing ahead with the sales of the product in question while there were civil complaints regarding its side effects. 6 Korean banks are on the list of the world's top 100 banks, according to Hana Institute of Finance's analysis of BankScope's data. KB Financial Group, Shinhan Financial Group, Hana Financial Group, Uribank, Nonghyup Financial Group and Industrial Bank of Korea made the list. The institute did not release the individual ranks, but noted that the Korean banks were ranked in the lower half of the list. US banks took 20 spots, followed by China with 10. According to the analysis, Korean banks rely heavily on loans compared to the world's leading banks. The ratio of total assets to debt of local banks stands at 68%, hovering above the top 100's average of 53%. Now in international news, the Islamic State militant group has killed nearly 150 people and injured hundreds more in Bashar al-Assad's previously safe Alawite heartland in Syria. Kim Mogyan has the latest.
The wave of bombings hit President Assad's coastal heartland, a part of the country which until now has escaped the worst of Syria's bloody civil war. According to the Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least 148 people were killed and 200 injured in Monday's attacks. Syrian state media also reported the attacks but said the death toll was 78. The Islamic State militant group has claimed responsibility, saying it was targeting members of Assad's Alawite minority. Reports say 3 bombings targeted bus stations in the port city of Tartus, which is home to a Russian naval facility, and another 4 in Jableh, near a Russian-operated airbase. The latter is where President Assad comes from and remains the center of his support base. The head of the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the bombings were by far the deadliest attacks on the 2 cities since the conflict in Syria erupted more than 5 years ago. Russia has expressed concern and said the bomb blasts underscore the need to press ahead with Geneva peace talks, which broke down last month. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon strongly condemned the attacks and called for an end to all acts of terror. He said those behind the bombings should be held legally responsible. The war in Syria has killed an estimated 270,000 people and displaced millions since March 2011. Kim Mo-kyan, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Tuesday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you, as always, for watching. We'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Our next scheduled bulletin coming up at 3 p.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.